from us.
Endurance always needs a reason. God wants us clearly to sit there, receive the Holy Spirit, then the power will come.
That is fully surrendered but fully serving God. We are moving on to the 4th chapter of Genesis, and again this is a familiar story. You might have heard n number of sermons. Definitely you might have studied, had a lesson on this in your Sunday school class, and even whenever you were raised in whichever church you had. And so we are trying to chart, not uncharted territory. We are moving through a very familiar passage, very familiar story. The story of Cain and Abel, the first brothers. The first man and women were Adam and Eve. And the story goes on to say that Adam and Eve had 2 sons. Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker on the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. This story has a lot of holes. What I mean by holes is that there are lots of things that God doesn't explain, or the author of the book doesn't explain. The book doesn't explain why God rejected somebody's sacrifice offering and accepted somebody's. That is, Cain's was rejected and Abel's was accepted. Why is that? The reason is not evident in the passage. It is not evident. Some people say it is because he offered a animal, he offered a vegetarian sacrifice. That is not the reason, because in the Bible both can be offered. In the light of the Bible, both are acceptable to God. That is not the reason. So the reason is not evident, and the reason is not explained also. So that's something. That is something like when I was preaching on the first chapter of Genesis, God leaves certain things not explained. Because God says, no, I don't want to. You don't need to know it. I will tell you what you need to essentially know. That is the thing. Now, this passage looks at rejection. It's about rejection. This passage is about rejection. We all experience rejection. I have experienced it many times. You run for positions, you run for this, and it starts from school, isn't it? You feel rejected. Children feel rejected. Their homework is not accepted. They fail the teachers. This thing, people refuse to play with them. They make their own teams, exclude you. And from very young age, we have used to. Rejection has become a reality. When somebody breaks up the relationship, or a man and first 2 people have relationship, they break up, there is a rejection. You went for a job and you are rejected. No, that's all possible. That's real. Rejection is a reality. But here it's talking about a rejection by God. That's more serious, isn't it? Cain and Abel, the first person to bring the offering was Cain, not Abel. Maybe Abel thought his elder brother is offering something, so he might have thought bringing an offering. So Cain must have credit for doing something nobody ever thought of, seeking God's favor. Nobody thought. Abel doesn't get credit for it, because Abel probably simply emulated or just copied Cain. But it talks about rejection by God. God rejected outrightly Cain's sacrifice and he accepted Abel's sacrifice without explaining to them why he did so. That is something that we also face many times. Why do God favor somebody, and do not favor me? Why did God endow somebody with so much beauty and me not so much an attractive figure? Why did God do that? Why did God favor somebody and did not favor me? Why did God favor somebody with such a good voice and I got this all flat voice? I can't never ever sing in the proper key. Why is that somebody favored and I'm not? I prayed, and both of us prayed. Two people prayed, but he or she her prayer is answered. Mine is rejected. Why is that? That's what it's all about. Sometimes haven't you experienced it? I have experienced it all these years of my life. The older you are, you have more and more cases, instances of rejection, not only by people, but sometimes by God. Now, when you turn to this passage, God comes into the picture. First of all, God did not ask them to do anything for him. He didn't say, offer me a sacrifice, I will do something. No. It was all a human initiative. Cain thought about it. Maybe one good morning, he got up and thought, what should I do to God? And he just took some offering. God's interest in this is not to explain why he did not favor Cain. Did not favor Cain. And why he? It's actually God is trying to say, how can you handle a rejection? Can we turn to verse 6, please? The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And what is the answer for that? God knows the answer. Cain knows the answer. Abel knows the answer. You all know the answer. What is the answer? Why are you angry? Because you didn't favor me. That's reason number one. Reason number 1A, that you not only did not favor me, but you favored my brother. You know the reason. So God says, why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, you will be accepted. And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Now what God says is, God comes and says, no, look, this is why you are rejected. Next time, I'll give you another chance too. If you do all these things, then you will be okay. No, God says, no, look at that. He says, if you do well, you will be accepted. But if you do not do well, the sin is crouching at the door. God says, now you are rejected. I have rejected you. That is how you take it. That's probably what God says. Now this is the way you process it. Now your sacrifice is not accepted, mine is accepted, other persons are accepted. But God is saying that, look, that is fine. I don't want to give you an explanation, but you see, if you do not well, sin is crouching. Now, when this rejection happens, you may not handle this rejection well. If you do not handle this rejection well, then there is a danger. Now, what might have happened is, Cain brought an offering, Abel brought a sacrifice. But how did they know that Cain's was rejected, Abel's was accepted? That's another big hole. We don't know that. But we can actually guess it. Probably Abel offered a sacrifice and probably he saw physical blessings in his life because his flocks multiplied and there was no damage and things like that. So he is visible maybe. But Cain also did and waited for God's favor. Nothing might have happened. That year probably Cain was a farmer. There was a drought or there was a flood or whichever way, probably it was affected. His life was affected. His farming was affected. A devastation. So probably Cain might have concluded that God favored his sacrifice and all that. Now this is exactly what happens, as I already said. What happens is that we see blessings in some people's life and no blessings in our life, apparently. There is an apparent partiality of God. I use the word apparent. It's not real. It appears as if God had favored somebody and God hasn't favored me. God has blessed his children, but my children are not as blessed as other person's children are. God has blessed a person with a good job. I'm still struggling. Why does God do? Both of us go to the same church. Both of us pay the same amount of tithe. We give the same amount of time for the church. We pray the same with the same fervor and time that we spend in prayer. Everything same. But God seems to apparently reject me and favor somebody else. I can't see that in my life. God's message there is how to handle it. Now, he says, manage the rejection. When these sort of things happen, people come to you and say, Pastor, I've been praying about it, nothing happened. But at the same time, some people are blessed. Now the most important thing is to learn in this passage from this scripture is how to manage it. How to manage rejection, even if it is from God. Now, this passage, before I come to that, this passage also talks about the unmanaged rejection. That means a rejection which is not properly managed. When God seems to be away from our life, when God seems to be passive in our life, and when we in our own human wisdom think that others are blessed more than us, though both parties love God equally. The greatest thing there is to manage that rejection. Where did Cain fail? Either probably we can call it a mismanaged rejection. Verse 6 says, and verse 5, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry and his face fell. That word face fell can be taken two ways. Both are valid. One way is to say that he was very sad. He's very sad. He became gloomy. The other is to say, human beings are made to look up to God. When his face fell, that means not only sadness, he stopped seeking God. He said, that's enough with God. I had enough with God. I don't need to anymore. I have no business with God. So that are two ways. One way is emotional, then the other is relational. Emotional means he becomes sad. The relational thing is that what's the use of going after this God? What is the point of looking up to him? What is the point of praying to him? What's the point of bringing another offering and try whether God will favor me or not? I don't want to I don't want to take any chance. This is what happens in a mismanaged rejection. Many people lose their faith because they see some contradictions. Quote unquote contradictions, apparent rejections. Why is God far off? You read through the Psalms, you will see God, they are complaining. How long, O God? Why are you standing far off, O God? How long? Why? Because they feel rejected by God. But that is one thing. But the other thing is that if you don't manage these sort of experiences with God, I'm not talking about rejection when people fail us. I'm talking about when God seems to be far off, when God seems to have rejected us, when God doesn't favor us. When we think that way, we have to be careful. And if you do not well, sin is crouching at the door. Because we get into a whirlpool. You know what's a whirlpool? A whirlpool is something which goes in circles and it sucks us. It is like a tornado Have you ever seen a tornado? No, but I've seen pictures. I have been in a place where it's a tornado prone area. The tornadoes, they actually suck up. Okay, it take you like in a circle, in a spiral, and suck things from this earth into it's a loop actually. Whirlpools are the opposite. Whirlpools actually make you drown from the surface down. But both has something in common, because there is a spiral which gains momentum, either downward or upward. So what happens here is that first thing is that, verse 5 please, the first thing is that he became angry. The first thing he had envy. You know what is envy? I had explained some time back. Envy is when you don't have something that others have. You long for it. Why not me? Why don't I have it? Jealousy is the opposite. Jealousy is trying to guard what we have. What we have. That is jealousy. Envy is actually, it is a sort of a covetousness or lust actually. It's a nuance or shade of that. I want what others have. Why did God favor Abel, not me? That is what the second part of the story, which I am not taking up now, that is for the next Sunday. What happened is that he took him for a hike. Abel, nicely took him for a ride or a hike and killed him. Now what happens? Envy. Then envy leads us to anger. God asks him, why are you angry? Look, so far Cain has done nothing. He was simply sitting at home, unhappy, envious, but angry. That's all. God comes at that point in his life and says, why has your face fallen? Or why are you not talking to me? Why are you not coming back to me? Maybe. Or why are you sad? What makes you sad? So then envy leads to anger. Anger then leads to murder. Right? And murder leads to fear. When he murdered Cain murdered Abel, then fear sets in his life. He tells God, if anyone sees me, they will kill me. So he's afraid of his own life. Now this week, all our television channels, newspapers are full of some horror, isn't it? Horrific. Every day, something new revelations are coming. Death, something like somebody said this is like an Agatha Christie novel, crime novel. Apparently, a mother has killed their daughter and tried to kill the son. Had 4 husbands, beating even the Samaritan woman. You see, no records in marriage, divorce. And we every day, and sometimes I get fed up with this, because every channel is every day this is running. This is the only story that we hear in the channels. So I said, what it is important, because people want to hear. That is what the news channels do. Look at this now. This is where it all started actually. You see, the first act of the book of Genesis is called the book of Genesis or origins, because it's the origin of everything. Origin of the world, origin of sin, and each sin, very specific sins, also originated in the book of Genesis. Disobedience started in Genesis. Hatred started in Genesis. Envy has its origin in Genesis. Then anger has its origin in Genesis. Fear has its origin in Genesis. And in the same chapter when we come to Lamech story, we have retaliation, revenge originating in Genesis, greed originating in Genesis, all sort of wickedness originating in Genesis. It is the origin of everything. Now let me tell you, human race in the 21st century hasn't invented anything new when it comes to sin. We only have improved it. Yeah. Cain, we have improved the way we can do evil. Okay, we have new tools to kill people. Right? We have new tools. It takes to a whirlpool. What is the whirlpool? Envy, anger, then murder. Then out of the murder comes the fear for your own life. After killing somebody, you are afraid of your own life. Then it is transmitted to Cain's sixth grandson. Lamech. Have you heard of his story? He said if Cain is avenged 7 times, Lamech will be avenged 70 times. 70 times. He multiplied with 7. We get the first multiplication table also from the book of Genesis. But in a very bad association, it has to do with revenge. See? Now, what God says here is that, look, you should stop. There could be rejections, but you should not become a victim of the rejection. The victim of the effects of rejection. There is sometimes God may not speak to us. Sometimes we may see God rejecting us, but these are all our thinking. Let me tell you that. These are all our thinking. But God says if you don't manage it well, there will be a problem. Because you get into a destructive, self-destructing loop of envy, anger, hatred, murder, and any sort of sin that we can think of, which further and further and further take us away from God. Until in the next passage, we read that he was driven away from the presence of God as his parents were driven away. Further, far away from God. This is why many people lose their faith. I have come across a lot of people, and they tell me, I remember once a elderly gentleman had some sort of flu that Nobby or Aaron and others are having now. Just many of us have that. It's a seasonal, right? Viral fever and all that. And he was down with a viral fever. He has a Bible school, he has a hospital, mission hospital, he runs a Bible school, he has a mission hospital, he runs a mission public school, he is a church planter, everything. Been serving God for so many years now. And when he had this flu, viral flu, in the bed, I visited him and he asked me, why did God do this to me? I wanted to say, it's not God doing this. You just walked in the rain unprotected. That's what it is. But some people can't process a common cold. Have you come across people? Yes. Maybe one of us or many of us may be like that. That's enough. A common cold could be enough for us to feel that God has rejected me. Common cold could be the reason for sometimes to hate people also. But I don't know, I haven't ever come across, I have never worked in crime branch. That's the reason. A person killing another person out of for this thing. But I know people have killed each other because they had some contagious diseases, plague, smallpox and all that. That's a different aspect. But God's warning here is rejection can, unless it is properly managed, when God seems to be away from our life, it has very disastrous consequence, and ultimately the victim of these consequences will be us only, nobody else. There will be somebody there, but ultimately but look at this. The next aspect that I would like to bring out is that rejection actually can be looked at positively. When God seems to be away from our life, when God seems not to favor us but somebody else, apparently it can be processed, it can be understood in a different way. First thing, you see this passage, have you ever looked at this way? What God rejected his offering. but God is kind enough to come and talk to him. How do you understand that? Here we see God rejected his sacrifice, but God did not reject Cain. This is the mistake that he made. Definitely God rejected his offering, but God did not reject Cain, him. If he had rejected Cain, he would not have come to him and to speak to him, to talk to him, and to warn him and to guide him. That's the thing. When we sometimes feel rejected, we should know that God is not rejecting us. Sometimes God rejects our attitudes, sometimes God rejects our actions. But it is not a total rejection of us. He is not. He is willing to come, talk, and guide us so that we don't fall into this whirlpool of sins. That's what God did to him. God came and warned him. God tried to counsel him because God hasn't rejected him. That is, many of us think that is, since God didn't answer my prayer for 1 or 2 years, probably God has rejected me. No, there may be something else there which God rejects. There is something else why God delays, God tarries the answer. There must be some way God has favored you, but you don't recognize it. Now, I had rejections in my life. Now, I applied to a college, the same college where I studied for further study. And the father, the Catholic father, rejected me. He outrightly rejected me because I did some foolish things as well. The reason is that I couldn't apply in time. And I was asking for grace. I said, why don't you give me an application? It was just over yesterday, and why don't you he can just give a note and a paper and give me an application. He refused it. He refused. He said, I won't give you. I said, why? Simply because I approached him on the bad hour of the day. Probably he was hungry or he had eaten a lot. I don't know. His mood was bad. I walked away from the college rejected. But another college, which is not that of a high reputation, was waiting for me because they wanted a candidate like me, because they did not have that reputation. I just walked in and see what you can say. With that sense of rejection, I was not excited about the college and all that. But that was in my life. I asked God, why did you reject me? But some others who are lesser grade than me got admission. I am rejected because I could not apply in the just 24 hours. I was late and I was rejected. But apparently I was not favored. But it took me years to realize that God had a plan for me in the new campus where we started a prayer ministry which is flourishing even now. Lots of people have come to the Lord through that. Very humble beginning, which we started under a tree with myself and 2 unbelieving friends of mine. A little prayer group under a tree during the lunch break became such a great moment. After I left after 5 years or something, it became such a movement. It became a revival later. That is, but I didn't recognize that God did not reject me, but God favored me in a slightly different way. That's a different thing. That's a different way. God is not rejecting me, but he was maybe rejecting some of my actions. But it actually takes us to a new level of relationship with God. God will be sometimes away from us. Sometimes we will not be able to understand God's favor in our life, as I did, as my example shows. We will not be able to understand the favor of God because we have clear definitions of what God's favor is. Our favor is a good job, a good marriage, a good family. We have predefined God's favor in our life. Predefined. But that may not. Many of times God's favors may not fit into this. Our predefined favors that we want from God. He may have. God is smarter than all of us, isn't it? So he may have his own way of favoring us. But God takes us to a new relationship. Comes and talks with us. I found it very, very encouraging. Now, the psalmist said, when he processes God's unfavor, Psalm now 119 verse 71 says, "It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes." It's a great opportunity, he says. Now I am afflicted. If I was not going through this problem, if I was not going through this suffering, if I was not going through this dark night of the soul in my life, then probably I would not have tried to learn God. Learn about God's word, His statutes, His demands from me. There are two ways of processing divine rejection, apparent rejection. One is to look away from God. The other is turn to God. If we can turn, see, when we face rejection, we can turn this way away from God, or we can turn this way to the right to a closer walk with God. The choice is ours. Or we can, when we go this way, when we turn to this side and choose the route of envy, anger, sin and fear, that pulls us down. People come to church, ask for prayer, ask for other favors, and they are not here because they tried 2-3 Sundays, nothing happened, they just walked away. What to do? You can't do anything. They came for healing, maybe they came for a job. Some people say, please pray for my job. So if sometimes they walk away because they got a job, sometimes they walk away because they didn't get a job, because they are seeking God for favors, and that favors doesn't happen the way they define the favors. They just walk away. But there are some people who say, even if you do this to me, I will still, like Job, people who have the terrific faith, terrific patience, like Job had. The man called Job, he will stick to God. When that comes, it's a new relationship is possible. That is what Paul said. Paul had an incurable disease. We don't know what it is, but it is something incurable. And there is nothing incurable with God. Everything can be cured. But there are certain things that God refused to heal. Sometimes God says that is, you live with it. It's very difficult to accept that. All of us want to be beautiful, handsome, healthy, prosperous. But God says no. Sometimes God says no. I will provide you for what you need today, and tomorrow I will provide what you need for tomorrow. Sometimes God will call people to that sort of a calling also. But people don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like to be that way. Not knowing where is my bill for, my credit card bill going to come. I don't want to live that way. But it is sometimes beautiful. It is sweet. It is sweet to what? How does that song go? Anyway, it's sweet to have sometimes that, because every day you see manna dropping. Every day, manna dropping. Not manna rotting in the fridge. Every day, some of us have to live with sickness in our lives. Not because God cannot cure it, not because God cannot heal it, but God, as God told Paul, every day I will give you help, grace to manage it. Right? Now look at 2 Corinthians chapter 12, 7. How a man of God processes, understands his own physical weakness. So to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh. A thorn, that is a metaphorical way of saying it. A messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited, to keep me in my place. It's very easy for many of us, to become very proud. Spiritual pride is the greatest enemy. How does spiritual pride set in? Oh yeah, it's easy to set in. It is like hard water. When you sometimes in some places hard water, when you boil, there will be white calcium deposit in the saucepan. Some places the water is so hard, you just keep it overnight. The calcium deposit compound will settle in the bucket. It's very easy. The very spiritual you are, you get into the church activity, you preach, you sing, you pray, and then Satan comes and pats on your shoulder and says, wonderful. That is when spiritual pride sets in. But what we can say, the remedy for that, sometimes if God loves us, really loves us, He will give us something to keep us in our place. Sometimes I preach well, sometimes I preach very bad. Sometimes people come and tell me, oh pastor, amazing. Sometimes some people say, useless. You know why? I thank God for those who criticize me, because that is keeping me in my place. Those who actually come and congratulate you, they are doing very good, they are nice people, they are good children of God, wonderful. But I also sense a danger in it. Danger. Criticisms can be destructive, but there's a high possibility, because criticism keep you in the right place. Okay? But don't be completely consumed by criticism. Don't get discouraged, because one thing that cannot get discouraged if you are a child of God. But don't be puffed up, proud and conceited, because you get, everybody comes and tells you, such a great sermon, such a great song, what a wonderful voice. It may not be really wonderful as they said. It's our politeness. But sometimes we don't have to ask for it. But sometimes we'll have to live with our frailties, our weaknesses, our inabilities, so that we have to find new levels of relationship with God. What did God tell Paul? God told him, my grace is sufficient for me. My grace for what? Not a sudden dramatic healing. My grace to live each day. That's amazing. I used to tell my friends abroad, we in India, we receive more grace than all of you. And they asked me why. I said, one instance. If we have a meeting, special meeting, those days before these inverters ever came, I said, we have to pray for the power supply. In some places we have 9 hours of power cut, some 4, and we don't know when it goes and when it comes. But you guys have assured power. So one reason I was saying is that we have to pray for all that. We have to pray for this, we have to pray for that, we have to pray. We depend on God more than you guys who live in the West. Not all the countries in the West, but I'm talking about the North Americans. Now, everything is granted. Everything is secure. Everything is fine. Nothing to worry at all. The buses will run in time. The trains will come in time. The flights will take off. Right? So you don't have to pray for safe travel. And even something happens to you, you are insured. So what there is no room for God to be evident in our life. I'm sorry, I have exaggerated a little bit, and I want to apologize to my friends from the West. Little bit of, you know what is exaggeration, but most of us take things for granted. As we take things for granted, we get less of God's grace in our life. Sometimes God says no, but God is willing to come and talk to us. Now, the final thing, God also wants us in managing our rejection. God comes to us with a warning. The warning is that we are very, very vulnerable to sin. Heaven says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do well, then remember, if you do not manage it properly, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Sin is crouching at the door. If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. That's a very powerful warning. What is crouching at the door? Crouching at the door is you are just going to go out of the door, through the door, out, and sin is not at your eye level. It bites you at your heel. That is one of the, I'm a dog lover, and they say these big dogs like German Shepherd and all that, they will jump and put their paws on your chest. I have seen it. It's a sniffer dog catching a thief. That's how it stops. It will just jump at you, put the paws on you to stop you, and maybe catch your neck also. But there is another watchdog. But many people don't realize that it is a watchdog. It's a watchdog. It's called the Pomeranian. Small one, cute little ones. They will not jump at you. When the robber enters, a stranger enters, it goes and catches this nerve. What do you call this nerve? Your nose? That's what it does. Nobody will notice a Pomeranian, because it is crouching. It's crouching. It walks stealthily and it hits the heel. That's what sin does. When many times we look for, we are careful, we are warned, we are alerted about visible, evident sins in our life. The danger that is waiting there, tall, visible, we will not bump into it. But there are things that we will stumble on. You don't have to bump into something. We will stumble on certain things. God wants him, see, you may avoid a big wall, but you may not be avoid a snake that is crouching in the grass. That's a great warning. And that's where Cain failed also. He went out through the door, and then took his brother for picnic in the park. That is where, because by the time this leech has bitten him. You may not be familiar with what a leech is. A leech, when we went to the lake to have a swim, there are leeches, very rare, but very common, and the leeches will bite you on your feet somewhere. But the amazing thing is that you won't know the pain of the bite. Now I was bitten many times by this thing, and when you come out of the water, you see something hanging there, and it becomes what you call swells with your blood. Then finally it falls off. When it had its fill, it will automatically fall off. If you try to take it, the stinges will be there. So never take it. We sometimes apply lime and it falls off. It should fall off itself. But you've been in the water for 30-40 minutes, enjoyed your swimming, you did all sort of things that you can do in the water, but the leech was sucking your blood because it was crouching in the water. Sin is many times like that. Envy is many times like that. We may not recognize envy, anger and fear is sucking our spiritual blood until we grow pale. God wants. He says, where did this start? This warning was given to Adam, his father. He said, the snake will seek your heel. You will break his head. Now, the snake was cursed to go crouching. So here is a very, very subtle suggestion that is talking about the devil's schemes. How devil attacks a person, a believer, a person who is so much committed to God, unnoticingly, without noticing, he may fall prey to sin. That's why in Ephesians 6:11, The word of God says, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Sometimes the devil will give a frontal attack. Okay? Frontal attack. Sometimes it will be a very stealthy crouching, which beats us, sucks us. Now Peter uses another metaphor, which you must be familiar with. That is, be sober-minded. 1 Peter verse 8, chapter 5 verse 8. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary the devil prowls round like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Seeking someone to devour. God's first suggestion is our vulnerability to sin. We are very, very vulnerable to sin. So God says, take guard, be watchful, be careful, be serious. It's an invisible thing. It's crouching. It is always there like a snake. You may not be visible, you may avoid it, but it will not avoid you. That's the warning. But let me conclude it. But another aspect of it is not to discourage us. God says, you have but, the verse 7 last verse, its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. It's not only a command, it's an encouragement as well. You can do it. That's what it means. God comes to Cain, who is offended because God apparently did not favor him. God comes with all kindness, grace to him, and to just to reason with him and says, no, I don't want to tell you why I did not accept you. That is not a point now. But I haven't rejected you. I am willing to talk to you. But now, if you don't process this rejection properly, there are greater dangers awaiting for you. You should avoid it. But he says, man, you can do it. Like we advise, counsel our children and students many times. We say, this is the reason. Probably we not tell the reason why you fail. Once a student came to me, not in this college, there are 3 or 4 of us sitting here. Not here. In a college where I taught. I was going through assignment, and every page I read, good. It was good, definitely. But when I turned the page up, this thing, and the back I gave a F and circled it. And a student came to me very angrily and said, sir, why did you write good? And finally you put an F for it. I thought you were going to give me an A plus for this. I said, good is good, all that is good, but totally it is bad. That's the point. See, that's the point. Because I was enjoying the reading, so I just unconsciously started scribbling good. Until finally I realized there is nothing in it. Except the word good that I wrote. So I gave an F. But at the same time I told him, see, look, this is where the problem is. It is simply good, but not more than that. See, this is the problem is. But what do you do with the student? You say, see, you can do it. Next time, you revise it and bring. Within 5 days time, a week's time, I'll give an opportunity to revise it and bring it back to me. I will give you very good, and a C minus at least on it. So what God says is that, look, sin is crouching at the door. You shall overcome it. Which means, here is the danger. You should and you can. There is actually a warning, there is an encouragement, and there is a command in that sentence. That's what God's dealing with us is. We don't have to be discouraged. There are 2 things that we need to do. As I summarized my sermon this morning. First, be warned. That is, sometimes there are rejections. God may not favor you the way you want God favor you and me, but be warned. Don't be carried away by that. God hasn't rejected us. God might have rejected or might have delayed His favor for us. But make sure that doesn't lead us to this down spiraling whirlpool of destruction, destroying others and our lives. Right? It can, but God also says, careful. But also God also says, we can do it. We can resist the devil. God gives us grace every time. But holiness or spirituality, godliness, I wanted to say, is still sticking to God when God apparently seems to be far away. That is what godliness is. One way I look at godliness is being with God, sticking to God, even when God seems to be far away. But sticking to God when God is always evident in our life, that doesn't require much godliness. It doesn't require much godliness. Godliness comes with patience. Godliness goes with faith, love. Somebody was alluding to or mentioning the fruit of the Spirit. Godliness goes with that. When everything is fine, if you love your God when everything is fine, there is no price for that. There's no reward for that. But sticking to God when God seems to be away, when God seems to have rejected us, that is what godliness is. But while we wait for God, patiently and in faith, make sure that we lead lives that are godly still, not resorting to worldly ways of resolving our problems. Falling our face, looking away from God, taking it on others whom God has favored. That is not godliness. Godliness is to stick to God even when God seems to have, underline the word seems to have, rejected us. May God bless us. Let's look to the Lord in prayer as we continue the worship.